In a small, seemingly peaceful town, the concept of swapping lives for a week sounded thrilling and adventurous. For three individuals, a man named David, and two women, Jessica and Amanda, the idea of wife swap seemed like an exciting way to break the monotony of their lives. But what began as a daring social experiment quickly spiraled into a nightmare, revealing dark secrets, hidden desires, and deadly intentions. This is a tale of twisted fantasies, unexpected bonds, and a shocking murder that rocked the community to its core. David Walters had always been a man of routine. His days were meticulously planned, each task a cog in the well-oiled machine of his life. He prided himself on his success, a thriving business, a beautiful home, and a marriage that, on the surface, seemed perfect. But beneath the polished exterior lay a growing discontent. David felt trapped in the monotony of his daily existence. His marriage to Jessica, once filled with passion and excitement, had become a predictable dance of responsibilities and obligations. One evening, while browsing online, David stumbled upon an article about a new reality show concept called wife swap. The premise was simple. Two families would swap wives for a week, offering a chance to experience a different way of life. The idea intrigued him. It promised excitement, a break from the routine, and perhaps even a way to reignite the spark in his marriage. David couldn't shake the thought from his mind. Over dinner that night, he broached the subject with Jessica. She listened, her fork hovering over her plate as he explained the concept. Initially, she was skeptical. The idea of living with another family, even temporarily, seemed absurd. But David was persuasive. He painted a picture of adventure, of stepping out of their comfort zone and seeing life from a new perspective. "Think about it, Jess," he urged. "It could be fun, a chance to experience something completely different. We could learn a lot about ourselves and each other." Jessica remained uncertain, but her curiosity was piqued. She agreed to consider it, and David took that as a victory. Over the next few days, he continued to sell the idea, highlighting the potential benefits. Jessica, seeing his enthusiasm, began to warm to the idea. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when they discussed it with their close friend Amanda. She was a free spirit, always up for an adventure, and her excitement was infectious. Amanda's enthusiasm tipped the scales, and Jessica finally agreed to participate. The trio decided to apply together, submitting their information and waiting anxiously for a response. When the acceptance email arrived, David was ecstatic. Jessica was nervous but intrigued, and Amanda was thrilled. They prepared for the swap, setting the rules and boundaries that would guide their week-long adventure. Little did they know their lives were about to change in ways they could never have imagined. The morning of the swap dawned bright and clear. David, Jessica, and Amanda gathered in their living room, the air buzzing with anticipation. They reviewed the guidelines one last time, ensuring everyone was on the same page. Amanda would move in with David, while Jessica would stay with Amanda's family. The idea was to fully immerse themselves in each other's lives, experiencing the highs and lows of a different daily routine. Jessica packed her bags with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had grown accustomed to her life with David, and the thought of stepping into someone else's shoes, even temporarily, was daunting. As she drove to Amanda's house, she couldn't help but wonder what she would learn about herself and her marriage. Amanda, on the other hand, was exhilarated. She thrived on new experiences and saw the swap as a grand adventure. Moving in with David was an opportunity to explore a different dynamic, and she was eager to see how their personalities would mesh. David watched as Jessica's car disappeared down the street. He felt a pang of anxiety, but pushed it aside, focusing on the excitement of the experiment. Amanda's arrival was a whirlwind of energy. She breezed into the house, her laughter filling the rooms. David found her enthusiasm infectious, and they quickly settled into a new routine. The first few days were filled with laughter and discovery. David and Amanda spent hours talking, sharing stories about their lives and experiences. David found Amanda's free-spirited nature refreshing, a stark contrast to the structured existence he had grown accustomed to. Amanda, in turn, was intrigued by David's disciplined approach to life. She admired his dedication and success, and their conversations flowed easily. Meanwhile, Jessica was adjusting to life with Amanda's family. It was a stark contrast to her life with David. Amanda's home was lively and chaotic, a constant buzz of activity. Jessica found herself drawn to the energy, appreciating the change of pace. She bonded with Amanda's children, enjoying the spontaneity and joy they brought to each day. As the days passed, each participant began to reflect on their own lives. David realized how much he had missed the excitement of new experiences. Jessica discovered a newfound appreciation for the freedom and unpredictability of life outside her structured routine. Amanda, always seeking adventure, found herself contemplating the benefits of stability and order. Despite the initial excitement, underlying tensions began to surface. David's controlling tendencies clashed with Amanda's free spirit, leading to small disagreements. Jessica, while enjoying her time with Amanda's family, missed the familiarity and comfort of her own home. The novelty of the swap was wearing off, and reality was beginning to set in. As the days of the swap continued, the initial excitement gave way to deeper, more profound revelations. Each participant began to uncover secrets and hidden aspects of each other's lives that they hadn't anticipated. Amanda, living with David, noticed his meticulous nature. He had a specific way of doing things, and deviations from his routine seemed to unsettle him. At first, Amanda found it amusing, but she soon realized there was a darker edge to David's need for control. One evening, as they sat down to dinner, she accidentally knocked over a glass of water. David's reaction was swift and sharp, a flash of anger crossing his face before he quickly regained his composure. "Don't worry about it," he said, forcing a smile. "Accidents happen." But Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to David's reaction than met the eye. She began to pay closer attention, noticing the subtle ways he exerted control over his environment and the people around him. It was unsettling, and she found herself walking on eggshells, careful not to trigger his temper. Meanwhile, Jessica was discovering her own secrets about Amanda's life. Amanda had always been the life of the party, a whirlwind of energy and enthusiasm. But living in her home, Jessica began to see the cracks in the facade. Amanda's relationship with her partner was strained, and there were moments of tension that belied the happy-go-lucky exterior. One night, while helping Amanda's children with their homework, Jessica overheard a heated argument between Amanda and her partner. "You're never here," Amanda's partner accused. "You're always chasing some new adventure, leaving me to pick up the pieces." Jessica felt a pang of sympathy. She had always admired Amanda's adventurous spirit, but now she saw the toll it was taking on her family. The realization was sobering, and Jessica began to reflect on her own life and the compromises she had made in her marriage. The turning point came when Amanda found an old photograph in David's study. It was a picture of a young woman, tucked away in a drawer. Amanda asked David about it, and his reaction was telling. He hesitated, his expression hardening for a moment before he brushed off the question. "Just an old friend," he said, but Amanda sensed there was more to the story. The photograph became a symbol of the secrets lurking beneath the surface, and Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Jessica, too, was grappling with her own revelations. She had always seen herself as the stable one, the anchor in her marriage to David. But living with Amanda's family had shown her a different side of herself. She found herself enjoying the chaos, the unpredictability, and the freedom to express herself without the constraints of David's expectations. It was a liberating experience, but it also brought to light the compromises she had made in her own life. As the week drew to a close, the participants were faced with the reality of their experiment. The swap had uncovered secrets and forced them to confront aspects of themselves and their relationships that they had long ignored. The initial excitement had given way to a deeper understanding of their own lives, but it also left them with more questions than answers. With the secrets now partially uncovered, the dynamics between David, Jessica, and Amanda began to shift in unexpected ways. What started as a simple experiment was turning into something far more complex, with emotions running high and forbidden desires bubbling to the surface. Amanda couldn't deny the attraction she felt towards David. Despite his controlling nature, there was something magnetic about him. She found herself drawn to his strength and confidence, qualities that stood in stark contrast to her own free-spirited approach to life. David, too, was not immune to Amanda's charms. Her energy and spontaneity were a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the predictability of his marriage to Jessica. One evening, after a particularly heated argument with David over a minor issue, Amanda found herself seeking solace in a glass of wine. David joined her, and the tension between them was palpable. They sat in silence for a while, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Amanda broke the silence. "Why do you need to control everything?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Amanda. It's just how I've always been. I guess I like things to be predictable." "But life isn't predictable, David. You can't control everything," she said softly, her eyes locking with his. David felt a surge of emotion. Amanda's words struck a chord, challenging his carefully constructed world. He reached out, placing a hand on hers. The touch was electric, sending a shiver down Amanda's spine. They both knew it was wrong, but in that moment, the attraction was undeniable. Meanwhile, Jessica was experiencing her own emotional turmoil. Living with Amanda's family had awakened something inside her, a sense of freedom and possibility. She found herself drawn to Amanda's partner, Tom. He was kind and attentive, qualities that had been lacking in her relationship with David. Tom, too, found himself captivated by Jessica's quiet strength and vulnerability. One evening after putting the children to bed, Tom and Jessica found themselves alone in the kitchen. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and the struggles they faced in their respective relationships. The conversation flowed easily, and Jessica felt a connection with Tom that she hadn't felt with David in a long time. As the night wore on, the tension between them grew. Tom reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from Jessica's face. She felt her heart race, torn between her loyalty to David and the growing feelings she had for Tom. They stood there, inches apart, the air thick with unspoken desire. Back at David's house, the situation was escalating. Amanda and David's flirtation had turned into something more tangible. Late one night, after a few too many glasses of wine, they found themselves in each other's arms. The kiss was passionate, a release of all the pent-up emotions and desires they had been suppressing. It was a moment of weakness, but it felt inevitable. The next morning, both David and Amanda were filled with guilt and confusion. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Amanda struggled with her feelings, knowing she was betraying Jessica, her friend. David, too, was racked with guilt, torn between his loyalty to Jessica and the undeniable connection he felt with Amanda. Jessica, unaware of what had transpired between David and Amanda, continued to grapple with her own feelings for Tom. She knew she had to make a decision, but it was one of the hardest choices she had ever faced. Her marriage to David was built on years of shared history and commitment, but the connection she felt with Tom was real and powerful. As the week drew to a close, the participants were left with a tangled web of emotions and desires. The swap had started as an exciting experiment, but it had exposed the cracks in their relationships and forced them to confront their deepest desires and fears. The final days of the swap were fraught with tension. The participants were no longer able to ignore the emotions and desires that had been stirred up. The experiment had pushed them to their breaking points, and something had to give. David and Amanda's relationship had become increasingly strained. The guilt from their indiscretion hung over them like a dark cloud, affecting every interaction. Amanda tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but David's controlling tendencies were becoming more pronounced. He seemed to be on edge all the time, and the smallest things would set him off. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Amanda decided she couldn't take it anymore. She confronted David, her voice trembling with emotion. "David, we need to talk," she said, standing in the doorway of the living room. David looked up from his work, his expression guarded. "What is it, Amanda? We can't keep pretending that nothing happened. What we did, it was a mistake. We crossed a line and it's tearing us apart." David sighed, running a hand over his face. "I know, but what do you want me to do? We can't change what happened." "No, but we can be honest about it. We need to face the consequences and figure out where we go from here." Meanwhile, at Amanda's house, Jessica was facing her own breaking point. The feelings she had for Tom were becoming impossible to ignore. She knew she had to make a decision, but it was tearing her apart. One night after the children were asleep, Jessica and Tom found themselves alone again. The air was thick with tension, and Jessica knew she had to say something. "Tom, we need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and longing. "I know, Jessica. This situation is complicated. I can't deny how I feel about you, but I also can't just throw away my marriage. David and I have a history, and I owe it to him to try and make it work." Tom nodded, his expression pained. "I understand, Jessica. I don't want to come between you and David, but I can't pretend that what we have isn't real." As the days went by, the tension in both households reached a boiling point. David and Amanda's arguments became more frequent and intense, while Jessica and Tom struggled with their unresolved feelings. The experiment that was supposed to bring excitement and adventure had instead brought chaos and heartache. The final straw came one night when David, in a fit of anger, confronted Amanda about her feelings for him. The argument escalated quickly, with both of them shouting and saying things they couldn't take back. Amanda, feeling overwhelmed and trapped, decided she had to leave. She packed her bags and left the house, seeking refuge with a friend. David was left alone, his mind racing with anger and regret. He had lost control, and now he was paying the price. He knew he had to make things right, but he didn't know how. The experiment had pushed him to his breaking point, and he was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The night that changed everything began like any other. Jessica was back at home, trying to navigate the awkward tension that now existed between her and David. They had agreed to talk about their experiences and feelings, but the conversation had been stilted and uncomfortable. They both knew that the events of the past week had irrevocably changed their relationship, but neither of them knew how to move forward. Amanda, still reeling from her confrontation with David, had decided to spend the night at a friend's house. She needed time to think and process everything that had happened. She felt a mixture of guilt and anger, torn between her feelings for David and her loyalty to Jessica. As the night wore on, the tension in the air became palpable. David, unable to sleep, paced the house, his mind racing. He was consumed by anger and regret, unable to shake the feeling that his life was spiraling out of control. He poured himself a drink, hoping to dull the edge of his emotions, but it only seemed to make things worse. Jessica, sensing that something was wrong, tried to talk to him. "David, we need to talk about this. We can't keep avoiding it." David turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pain. "Talk about what, Jessica? How our marriage is falling apart? How you were ready to leave me for Tom?" Jessica was taken aback by his accusation. "That's not fair, David. I was trying to find myself just like you were." Their argument escalated quickly, emotions running high as they hurled accusations at each other. The tension that had been building all week finally reached its breaking point, and in a moment of blind rage, David lashed out. The details of what happened next were a blur. A struggle ensued, filled with shouting and the sound of things breaking. In the chaos, Jessica was injured. David, horrified by what he had done, froze in shock. The reality of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. He had lost control, and now he was facing the unthinkable. Jessica lay on the floor, unconscious and bleeding. David, his hands shaking, called for help. The police and paramedics arrived quickly, and Jessica was rushed to the hospital. David was taken into custody, his mind numb with disbelief. The small town was rocked by the news. What had started as a simple social experiment had ended in tragedy. The community was left in shock, struggling to comprehend how things had gone so horribly wrong. The investigation into the events of that fateful night was swift and thorough. The police interviewed everyone involved, piecing together the details of the tragic incident. David was charged with assault, and the case quickly became the talk of the town. Detective Sarah Lawson was assigned to the case. A seasoned investigator, she approached the situation with a meticulous eye, determined to uncover the truth. She began by interviewing David, who was now sitting in a small interrogation room, his face pale and drawn. "Mr. Walters, can you tell me what happened that night?" she asked, her voice calm and measured. David took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "It was an argument that got out of hand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Detective Lawson listened carefully, noting his demeanor and the details of his story. She could sense his remorse, but she needed to understand the full context. She turned her attention to the other participants, starting with Jessica. Jessica, recovering in the hospital, was cooperative but visibly shaken. She recounted her version of events, describing the escalating tension between her and David. She also spoke about her feelings for Tom and the complexities of their relationships. Amanda was the next to be interviewed. She was distraught, feeling a deep sense of guilt for her role in the events. She described her relationship with David in the moments leading up to the confrontation. Her account provided valuable insights into David's state of mind and the dynamics between the participants. Tom, too, was interviewed. He was supportive of Jessica, expressing his concern for her well-being and his regret for the part he played in the situation. His perspective added another layer to the complex web of emotions and motivations. As the investigation progressed, Detective Lawson uncovered more details about the participants' lives. She learned about David's controlling nature, Jessica's struggle for independence, and Amanda's desire for adventure. Each piece of the puzzle painted a clearer picture of the events that had led to the tragic night. The evidence was compelling, and the case against David was strong. His actions, while not premeditated, had resulted in serious consequences. The investigation revealed the depth of the emotional turmoil each participant had been experiencing, and the tragic outcome of their attempt to break free from their routines. As the investigation continued, more dark revelations came to light. The police uncovered secrets from each participant's past, adding new layers to the already complex situation. David's background revealed a pattern of controlling behavior that extended beyond his marriage. Former colleagues and friends described him as meticulous and demanding, with a tendency to become aggressive when things didn't go his way. This information painted a troubling picture of David's character, further complicating his defense. Jessica's past also came under scrutiny. She had always been seen as the stable one in the marriage, but the investigation revealed that she had struggled with feelings of inadequacy and a longing for freedom. Her attraction to Tom was not just a fleeting infatuation, but a symptom of deeper issues within her marriage to David. Amanda's history was equally complex. She had a troubled past marked by a series of tumultuous relationships and a pattern of seeking excitement at the expense of stability. Her involvement in the swap and her subsequent relationship with David were seen as part of a larger pattern of behavior. The revelations added to the emotional weight of the trial. Each participant was forced to confront their own flaws and the choices that had led them to this point. The community, once supportive, was now divided, with many struggling to understand how such a tragedy could have unfolded. The trial was a highly publicized event, drawing attention from the media and the community. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to see the outcome of the case that had shocked their town. David's defense team argued that the incident was a tragic accident, a result of heightened emotions and a lack of control. They painted a picture of a man pushed to his breaking point, struggling with the pressures of his life and the complexities of the swap. The prosecution, however, focused on David's controlling nature and his actions on the night of the crime. They presented evidence of his behavior leading up to the incident, including testimonies from Jessica, Amanda, and others who had witnessed his aggressive tendencies. Jessica took the stand, her testimony a key part of the trial. She spoke about the escalating tension in their marriage and the events of that fateful night. Her account was emotional and powerful, leaving a strong impression on the jury. Amanda also testified, providing a detailed account of her relationship with David and the dynamics of the swap. Her testimony highlighted the emotional turmoil each participant had been experiencing and the impact of David's controlling behavior. The trial was intense, with emotions running high on both sides. The community watched as the details of the case were laid bare, each new revelation adding to the complexity of the situation. The jury deliberated for days, weighing the evidence and the testimonies. In the end, David was found guilty of assault, a verdict that brought a sense of closure to some, but left others grappling with the lingering questions and emotions. The trial had been a cathartic experience for the participants, forcing them to confront their own actions and the consequences of their choices. The aftermath of the trial was a time of reflection and healing. The community slowly began to recover from the shock of the events, though the scars would remain for a long time. The participants, too, were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. David, now facing a prison sentence, was forced to confront the reality of his actions. He spent his days reflecting on the choices he had made and the consequences they had brought. The structure and routine he had once valued so highly had ultimately led to his downfall, and he was left to grapple with his own demons. Jessica, freed from the constraints of her marriage, began the difficult process of rebuilding her life. She sought therapy to help her understand her own emotions and the choices she had made. The experience had been a catalyst for change, forcing her to confront her own desires and fears. She found solace in the support of friends and family, and slowly she began to heal. Amanda, too, faced a period of introspection. The swap had been a wake-up call, forcing her to recognize the impact of her actions on those around her. She sought to make amends with Jessica, and their friendship, though strained, began to mend. Amanda also sought therapy, determined to break the pattern of behavior that had led her to this point. Tom, meanwhile, continued to support Jessica. Their relationship, though complicated, had grown stronger through the ordeal. They decided to take things slowly, focusing on their own healing and growth before making any long-term commitments. The community, once united, was now marked by the events of the past weeks. The tragedy served as a reminder of the hidden struggles that often lie beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. It sparked conversations about mental health, relationships, and the pressures of modern life, prompting many to seek help and support. The story of the wife swap that turned into a nightmare became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the fragility of human relationships and the consequences of unchecked desires. For David, Jessica, Amanda, and Tom, the experience had been a painful but ultimately transformative journey, forcing them to confront their own truths and seek a path to healing and redemption. In the end, the town slowly moved on, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. The participants, each in their own way, began to find a new sense of purpose and understanding, determined to learn from their past and build a better future. The scars would remain, but they served as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of forgiveness and growth.